Thank you all so much for coming to the Knox Media panel on filmmaking in East Tennessee. Thank you to our panelists and to our sponsors and to everyone who helped put this on. Thank you guys so much. I'll go over everybody's names at the end. I'm too nervous to start. I'll fumble something. So before we get started, I would like for the panelists to all give their names and the pronunciations for me. Will you start, Elaine?
Sure. Ooh, I'm hot. I'm Elaine McMillion Sheldon, and I'm a director and documentary filmmaker and professor at UT.
I'm Chad Cunningham, and I'm a writer-director.
I'm Paul Harrill, and I'm a writer and director, and like Elaine, I'm also a professor at UT.
I'm Siam Manuels. I'm director and filmmaker.
Kurt Willis, filmmaker, actor, and the film office director at Visit Knoxville.
And I'm Amelia Bartlett. I'm a board member of Knox Media. I'm a writer and an actor. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time as well. I really appreciate you. Thank you to Honeybee Styling for coming through with the seats and the decor, for Horizon, for the lighting, for Wavelength, for sponsoring all these beers. Hell yes! And to Sono Locus for making sure that all of us could be heard tonight. And for Big Slate for running that camera. Thank you so much. I'm not gonna clap. I feel like I'm gonna mess it up. Yeah, okay. So I wanna get started real quick, and I know it's dark out there, but I wanted to do like a show of hands real quick. Who here has participated in the making of at least one? Somebody heard me. You can turn the lights down. It's okay. The vibe is fine. But
Get them all off.
it's easier. We can just pretend it's us. It's fine. So who here has participated in the making of at least one independent narrative or documentary film? Okay, about half. All right. Who wants to be working in narrative or documentary filmmaking but isn't right now? Raise your hands higher. I can't see you. Okay, cool. So we've got some people in the middle here we got to get in the loop. And who considers themselves to have a film production career? Career's a tricky word. Career's tricky. And that's kind of where I want to start, because Knoxville is not known for being a place where it is exactly easy to make a career in film production. And so I would love it if each panelist, we're going to go in order this one time, could just talk a little bit about the way you came to the career that you have now in filmmaking and how the region sort of shaped your path. So Elaine, if you'll start us off.
Oh, gosh. Well, my career's changed quite a bit in the past 3 years because I started teaching at UT. So maybe I can start at the beginning of how the career started, which was just making. I graduated with a degree in journalism, realized that wasn't enough, went and got my MFA in visual and media art, started to understand documentary history and theory, and started just making. So that's been 10 years of making, and unfortunately had to make a lot before anybody would ever say, hey, I'm gonna fund this, or hey, I'm gonna help you make this. And so that has been my career, was just 5 years of making before anybody would give me development money. So doing other jobs, teaching workshops and giving lectures and finding out what I'm just naturally more comfortable doing to make money rather than forcing myself to learn something new to make money, and positioning it that way. And then eventually, like I said, after about 4 years of making, being able to fundraise properly for independent films. And so that's sort of what the past, I would say, 6 years has been, with Matt completing a feature film, independent feature film in January. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I started in the short film, Knoxville Film Festival. I started with weddings and slowly kind of got the narrative bug and fell into the Knoxville Film Festival, which was, you get hooked immediately when you see your film on the big screen. And so I did that for a couple of years. And I mean, I would push back a little. I would say this is actually a great place to have a career. because there are so many places that are hiring. We have so many great production companies. We have not just in the commercial space, but in the television space. Like, we're a very high production city for being as small as we are, and with places like River and Jupiter creating as much work as they are. Jupiter alone might have 6, 7, 8 crews running around at a given time. I think it's just about finding that opportunity. And I think going back to what Elaine said, it's about making. If you make, that opportunity will find you. And that happened with me with the Knoxville Film Festival. John Kennedy, when he was at Jupiter, came and found me and brought me in, and that's how I got started. And I've been lucky enough to direct as my full-time job.
So when I was in high school, I worked at Pizza Hut, and after I get off work, everyone would be like, all my friends would ask if I would want to go out for pizza with them, and it was the last thing I wanted to eat. So I don't work in film and TV in Knoxville for those kinds of reasons, which is that I wanted to be an independent filmmaker and write and tell stories that I had in my head. And for me, that when I lived in Philadelphia, I was in film school and lived in Philadelphia. I'm originally from here. I got a taste of working on other productions, which was really fun and really exciting, but it was also, as those of you who do it know, it's also incredibly exhausting. And it's really hard to make time then for your own work, especially if you want to be a writer, because that takes such solitary and specific kinds of time to devote to the work. So when I was finishing up film school and a little bit beyond that, I decided not to sort of pursue a career in commercial production and to go into teaching so that I could have the space to make the work that I wanted to make and to sort of make only the work that I wanted to make. I also had as a model, and I'm not saying this was a positive model, though he was a positive model in many other ways, as a model, my father, who worked the same job in Oak Ridge his entire life. So I was not sort of conditioned to the, to sort of gigging or being used to the idea of like not knowing where the next paycheck was coming from. So that was all. Those were the kinds of things that fed into it. And so in terms of my own work, it's been a long journey. I've been doing this for a long time. If there's one takeaway or I would give you from my perspective, it's that you have to put in the work, but you also have to be patient with this work.
Well, I don't know what I have should be called a career yet. Started back in high school. I wrote my first zombie short film. Well, I casted everybody, my mom and my pastor, everybody, and I attempted to act in it. But the DP bailed out on me, and so I started filming it myself and directing. And that's how I found myself behind the camera instead, because actually I like this better. Ever since I jumped into the Knoxville Film Festival, I made a bunch of short films. Some failed, some succeeded. Still in the process of producing first feature, so I'm not there yet. So I'm kind of going to the direction this guy's going.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, so I always wanted to be an actor. I grew up in the plains of Indiana, so I don't know why I wanted to be an actor. It was just something that I felt pretty strongly. I wasn't exposed to it in northern Indiana with 1,000 acres of corn surrounding my house. But I told my mom even back then, I'd rather be chasing my dream. And I'd sleep on a park bench in LA and chase my dream instead of making $200,000. And I think it was probably true. I didn't test it. But I ended up going to college and playing baseball, so it delayed that. And then I got out of college, took some regular jobs, got married. That was a disaster. That's a completely different story. But the feeling of wanting that never went away, and it was just clawing at my brain all the time. But I wasn't until I was in my 30s that I finally felt enough pain from it, I guess, to actually do something about it, force myself to do something about it. And I was lucky enough I had a cousin of mine that her best friend in high school her dad was a screenwriter, and I was talking to my cousin one day, and I was telling her about, well, I wanted to go to LA, but I just didn't have the nerve to do it. And she's like, "Why? My best friend's dad is a screenwriter." I'm like, "In Indiana? What are you talking about? There's no way." But she's like, "Yeah, he's written all these things." And I'm like, so I looked him up, and he's written for a bunch of studios. He wrote Larger Than Life with Bill Murray and Matthew McConaughey. And I'm like, I got to meet this guy. So I was home for the holidays, and she arranged a meeting, and I talked to him and told him the story and how I badly wanted to be in the industry. I wanted to be an actor, but I just didn't want to go to LA. He's like, "Well, just break in or just try maybe on the writing side." And I'm like, "I don't know how to do that either." But this guy was just really generous with his time and his talents, and he mentored me for a year and a half on my first screenplay. And I was lucky enough to get the first screenplay in the right hands of this production company in Nashville back in 2007, I guess. It's been 16 years now. And it got produced. Of course, I wrote myself as the lead. And that was part of the deal when they signed on to do the film. It was a little $500,000 film back in 2007 that we shot here called Amateurs, a baseball film. And that ended up opening up a lot of doors. The distributor that had that film ended up forming her own production company and started making films, family-friendly films. And she brought us on board to make those four, it was Engine 15 Media in LA. So we started making family-friendly films for her. And then when we were making the last film that I made for her, the film office job came open. And I'd always, at that point, I really wanted to grow the feature film portion of production here in Knoxville because it wasn't quite there. I mean, you got legends like Paul Harrill that was making films in, but not a lot else, sporadically. And I wanted to change that. So when I learned about the film office opening, I had to be a part of that. So I was lucky enough to get that job, and I've been there going on close to 10 years now. So.
Wow, 10 years.
Yeah, I'm old.
I mean, your words, not mine.
You started when you were 15.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
everyone up here has a very different career, despite everyone kind of having the same desire to tell the stories that you see in your head. But I'm actually curious to talk about the most career-y career on this stage, which is yours, Kurt, because I want to know what the film office does.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, so in 2014, we opened the film office, and as a filmmaker, I kind of knew what filmmakers were looking for, what it would take to recruit films. It's just to be a one-stop shop for resources. You know, we all the permitting goes through us at the film office. We made that free and easy and quick, turn permits around really quickly. We help with locations scouting, like a lot of city locations we made free. We at Visit Knoxville, we are the Convention and Visitors Bureau, so the hoteliers in town are our close partners. So we help get incredible rates for films that are coming into town, and we also, one thing that about a year in that I knew that would kind of change the game is local incentives. We have a lot of soft incentives, and first of all, let me just say that most of the people in this room, without these folks, I'd be dead in the water. Without the fantastic crew that we have in town, that is a big draw when recruiting films. It doesn't happen without it because they can't bring in everybody from LA or everybody from Atlanta or everybody. It's just too expensive for them. And we have good quality crew here, and I knew that from making films. So I knew that was another edge that we had. So thank you, by the way, for helping make it much easier. Anyway, we got a local incentive. The state incentive is a 25% grant rebate on your Tennessee spend, and I was able to get the county and the city on board to do a local incentive. We can throw a few percentage points on top of what the state provides, and it gives us a real edge. And since 2016, it's worked. Since 2016, I think we're over 20 films. We've got 3 or 4 more scheduled this year. So it's a good. There was a lot of lifestyle television. There's a lot of commercial, a lot of Jupiter, everything. Great production companies, and because of that, great crews. But the narrative work wasn't here. It's here now. We just made Movie Maker Magazine's list of best cities for filmmakers to work and live in for the 3rd time. So we're on that list right now. So anyway, that's what the Film Office does.
That's awesome, thank you. So you talk about programming, and there's somebody else up here on this panel who knows about some programming going on. Paul, could you maybe chime in? Don't look so surprised. You're sitting on the stage. You're wearing a mic. I will definitely talk to all of you.
Yeah, I want to get back to Pizza Hut. Go ahead.
I want to talk about the film festival.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I'll do a little pitch about it. I was joking with Kurt, who is also involved with the programming or the organizing of this film festival. So, as many of you know, the Knoxville Film Festival, which actually started as the Secret City Film Festival many years ago, Keith McDaniel, as many of you know Keith, he did an outstanding job starting this film festival in the region and supporting it, and then bringing it here to Knoxville. My first feature had its Knoxville premiere at the 2014 festival. It was a great festival, but Keith decided to retire the festival after this last edition in 2022. Let me jump over then. In 2014, 2015, Darren Hughes, who's a local filmmaker, film critic, and I, we decided to start something called the Public Cinema, and which was a sort of roving micro cinema. We would do these one-off screenings of movies that wouldn't come to Knoxville, even playing. We didn't have Central Cinema at the time in 2015, and they wouldn't screen at the Downtown West movie theater. And like we would look at Film Comment magazine, and of the top 50 films, critics' top 50 films of the year, 25 of them wouldn't make it to Knoxville. So we set out to start this organization to bring films to Knoxville that wouldn't screen here otherwise. We screened one night only. We paid the filmmakers or distributors, and the screenings were always free. We never charged for a single screening. We always found anonymous donors or corporations or whoever, the corporate donors, to sponsor these screenings. We did this for a number of years, and we sort of faded out with the pandemic. So now, when Keith McDaniel decided to retire the festival at the end of last year, Kurt reached out to Darren and myself about possibly starting a new film festival. So it's called Film Fest Knox. It's going to happen November 10th through 12th of this year, first edition. And I'm not involved in the programming of the festival. I'm only calling myself a co-founder, that means I get to throw out opinions every now and then. But Darren and Kurt and the whole Visit Knoxville team, not just the film office, but the whole Visit Knoxville team, is behind this festival. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be different than the Knoxville Film Festival. It should be different. It shouldn't just be a carbon copy of what Keith built. It should be different. I can say that there's going to be a regional, there's going to be special emphasis on American regional films, films made from around the country that are not based in New York or LA. And the competition for that section of films will be about 6 films, and the prize for the best film, Regal Cinemas is a presenting sponsor, or the presenting sponsor of the festival, and we can announce this, right? Yeah, it's actually been announced. Yeah. Kurt knows more about it than I do, but Amelia asked me. Regal is going to give that film the winning film an Academy Award nomination run, qualifying run in there are 6 cities. I'm not saying which cities, but there are 6 cities where you can qualify for Academy Awards consideration. So they're going to give that to the film. So if it's a film without distribution, it will be now a film with distribution. If it's a film with distribution, they will be able to augment their distribution with that. Mm-hmm. There's also going to be a competition. It's different from the sort of timed film competition that Knoxville Film Festival did. And Kurt, maybe it's appropriate for you to say something about what that will be.
Sure, yeah. First of all, Keith, we owe a great debt of gratitude to. He did it for 19 years, blood, sweat, and tears, and we love him for it. it would have been a shame to not have anything because it's such a good film town. So we decided to pick up the baton. But yeah, the new timed competition is called Elevate. And the idea behind it, I guess, is to get people thinking more about feature length structures. So it's still just 7-minute short film standalone, but there's going to be a 1-minute elevator pitch that precedes your short film. And the short film is going to be basically a proof of concept for the feature version of your short film. So yeah, we're excited about it. We think it'll be different than what's been done in the past, which doesn't make it better, just makes it different. And we're excited about where it may lead and the thought process it might cause people to just start thinking about features.
Yeah. It's really meant to foster more ambition in the community for people to make bigger and bigger work that will reach wider and wider audiences.
I'm sure that ambition is already in this room, and the elephant along with it is the money. Would anyone like to start the discussion on your experience funding independent films and what that's been like for you? Don't all jump at once. If somebody doesn't speak up, I'm gonna call on you. Chad.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I've never made a feature film that... All right, I kind of made a feature film. Pseudo feature film. But that was kind of a one-off money-wise. Other than that, short films I've always funded out of my pocket and out of the good graces of people who believed in me and that I earned favors from through working with them for years and years and trying my best to take care of them on set. And that's how I always got funding. I never did the crowdfunding or any of that. I always thought that it was kind of my responsibility to pay for it and take care of people and shepherd a film into existence that way. Now, as for features, I have no idea. I've been trying to do the larger model of writing a feature film and taking it out, with my manager taking it out and taking meetings and doing all these things, and that's certainly one way to do it. It's just it's a very hard run, and obviously our industry in Hollywood is a dumpster fire right now. We have obviously a writer's strike, for anyone who doesn't know, a writer's strike and maybe a SAG strike coming. And there's a really big flux happening in the industry with studios wanting profitability and all of that. So I think really it should encourage us to turn inward, like what they're trying to do at the film festival, and really be making films here and figuring out the best model of how can we do that and how can we do it without, get it to a point where it's healthy and we can hire people and pay them their rate and not be asking for favors and doing, really, really cheap films where we kill everyone on the crew, but we have a film at the end and then no one wants to do it again for another 2 years. And, is there a way for us to create a situation where Knoxville is also making its own work and everyone's eating with it? And I think that would be really amazing. And, obviously Paul's doing really big stuff and has figured out a way to do it. Where'd you get your money, Paul?
I'm gonna come back to you.
Yeah, I don't want to talk yet.
Well,
I'll try to think of an answer in the meantime. Yeah.
But Elaine, you mentioned when you were talking about your career how you made and made and made for 4 or 5 years, but then you were able to get funding. So what was the switch? Was it like some sort of approach, or you met the right person?
Part of it's contacts. I mean, keeping track of everyone you're meeting along the way and understanding that person may be in one position now that doesn't have money, but the one I might be referencing is a former producer at the New York Times who could only pay me $2,000 to make a film, then became an EP at Netflix, and I bought 2 of my films. So like keeping in contact with people that, so that not just using contacts as disposable as this person you meet, but actually forming relationships. So that's been really helpful for me. I do a lot. I mean, I work in nonfiction So my world's different. There's actually money to
Tell us about
specifically,
that money.
yeah, and it's not a lot, and it's hard to get, but there are pools. Yeah,
I
so.
want to know where to find that money.
Yeah, well, there's grants. Those are obviously very long term. You apply for a grant, wait 6 to 8 months to find it. I just got rejected from them today. So like your results are fairly low, but you learn how to write about your film. You learn how to pitch your film, and you just get really comfortable doing that, and you apply to a bunch. I've been really fortunate. I actually think, I'm new to Knoxville. I'm from West Virginia, but all my work is centered in Appalachia. So this is the only place I want to be. So for me, it's not a deficit being here, and I think we need to potentially start thinking about when we talk about being in a Knoxville film community or an Appalachian film community, that it's actually like something you're missing out on if you're not here, right? That it's a choice to be here, and that we can make work here that they can't make elsewhere, given geography and given stories that are here and all this stuff, all the treasures that are here. But there's grants in the nonfiction space that are sort of tried and true. Everybody's applying for them. And the one I got rejected from today said they had 151 applicants, and they're only giving 3 grants. So it's really difficult, but the more you apply, the more likely you're to get them. There's smaller grants, and the Tennessee Arts Commission has smaller grants too, individual artist grants. But then there's commission too. So I've been commissioned by Frontline, PBS, Field of Vision, the New York Times, and those are, they create a budget and say, this is how much this is going to cost to make this film, and you go out and make that film. And the trade-off of that is it's not independent. They give you notes, right? So in some ways they control the film, but I'm pretty stubborn, so I usually try to get my way on things that I spend the most time in the field making. And then you can sell your film afterwards, right? And right now the market is really rough for nonfiction. So none of the streamers are buying anything. They're making original content. And we premiered our film at Sundance in January. I think only 3 documentaries have sold domestically all year. And so it's a really tough market. And so we're just doing self-distribution and trying to be creative in that way. Mm-hmm. But the funding from that film, I raised $250,000 from grants. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the money came from Paul connected me with a private investor who was interested in getting into funding films. And then I have an agent, which I do think is very helpful if you're going to be in a place that isn't, part of the conversation in LA and New York, to have someone there. The agents aren't, I do love my agent. If she watches this, she won't, but agents aren't always, they don't always have your back all the time, but they're in the room where you can't be. And that's important. So she was able to connect us with someone who funded the rest of the film. Drexler Films is their name, Peggy Drexler. So, and they only do like 5 films total. I mean, she's done 7 films in her whole life, so she doesn't take on a lot. So it is about connections and staying connected. It's also about sometimes identifying nonprofits that are working in the space that you're documenting and looking at their donors, right? And going to their donors and seeing if there's people that are, if it's an environmental film, who's funding those issues, and can you make a film that will sort of like help that nonprofit in their work, but not tell their story necessarily? Mm-hmm. So it's a little easier with nonfiction, I feel like, because people want a story to bring an audience together in that way. And I think there's probably room for that in the narrative space, but I personally have not experienced that. So I would say it's grants, commissions, selling after the fact, which is the hardest. But mostly, for me, my husband and I, we mostly just work as a team of 2 with maybe a sound person if I'm not doing sound. So doing things affordably is important, and not waiting to get $1 million budget to make your film, but actually making it in a way that is sustainable. He's a DP and I'm a director, and he's also a director, so we trade off and we do a lot of the roles and we make it work. And I also would say we've made all of our films in the region, and what's so great about it, like when we want to film a bar scene in West Virginia or something, we've got like 7 people who are excited for their bar to be in that scene, right? So whereas if you're making films in New York and LA, people are like, you're asking for favors. They're like, come on, like you charge you an arm and a leg, and 30 other people are lining up to ask for that favor. So the community itself is excited to see that happen, and that's really cool.
That's awesome. Siam, Paul, do either of you want to chime in?
Well, just going to piggyback for what Chad was talking about. I've never made a feature film, but most of the films that I made have been shorts and out of pockets. Mm-hmm. So self-funded. Sometimes I get help from family, some friends. Some of them are actually in this room. And sometimes I try to talk to people who are who can do me a favor and not do them a favor later. So like if you have a friend who's making a movie, you show up, you you show up, you do what you can, and they show up to yours too. So for me, it's all about at the moment. It's all about staying connected with people who will be helpful to you in the future. If you're making a movie, but you're actually lending a hand to them if they need it.
Awesome.
I mean, everything that has been said, I would agree with. Sort of try to add something new to what's been said. I'll say that. So I've made 2 features and I've made a few short films, and the money for my features has come from different places. The money for my shorts came from different places. One was a grant. One was funded by ITVS, which is an arm of Public Television Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It was a narrative. My first, but maybe the first thing I'll say is really, everyone keeps talking about the relationships, and if you're in the audience, you're thinking, okay, well, that's great, but who are the relationships who have the money? Like how do you actually find the money? And it's not who you think, and it's never going to come from where you think it's going to come from, has been my experience. But it is about the relationships, and not dealing with people transactionally, but dealing with people interpersonally, and that things sort of come out of a real place. It is hard in narrative film. The first, and I want to say something about this sort of idea of like, staying small and working with your resources. There's a little story here, which is in 2000 I'd written this feature film, and it was 5 stories. It was an omnibus, 5 separate stories, and they were all set here. And I got a producer, a New York-based producer, a woman named Mary Jane Skalski, who's I literally talked to today, who worked for Good Machine, this legendary New York production company. Ang Lee came up through, Hal Hartley, all these other great filmmakers from the 90s. She read my script and liked it and was like, I want to help you produce this movie. And she was like, oh, well, what if you just made a short film, one of the 5 shorts, what if you made that as a proof of concept? Because I didn't really have anything that was a really strong example of my directing work. I just had some film school shorts. And I wrote a grant and I got that grant. And I was very lucky. It was given to one person nationwide and I got it. And we made that movie in 2000 and had the community came out for it in terms of everything everyone said here in terms of people helping people out. It was an amazing experience. It's a short called Gina, an actress age 29. A lot of you know Amy Hubbard. She has like 5,000 Facebook friends. She's the star of that movie. There's a chance I could throw my beer can and hit one of Amy's friends in this room. She's the star of that movie. And we had the good fortune of premiering it at Sundance, and it won the jury prize at Sundance. And
real quick, good fortune of premiering at Sundance?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean,
how does that work?
It was. We submitted it. I mean, I think it's political with features. I think that but with short films, I think that there are very few there are more and more short films, I guess, made by like famous people or whatever. But I'd like to think that they liked the movie.
So you just submitted it?
We just submitted it. There was no like special phone call or whatever, slipping somebody money. It's just like they took it. I was like you. I had not made a movie. Some of you have made movies. I had not made a movie really, and I made this movie, and I was living in Knoxville, and it got in, and then it won an award. It won the award, and which was anyway crazy. But The thing that happened after that, though, the reason I want to tell this story is that an agent came up to me afterwards and said, where do you live? And I said, I live in Knoxville. And he was like, is that near Silver Lake? Like that was a part of LA. He didn't understand. He couldn't process the concept of me living somewhere outside of New York or LA, much less living in Knoxville, Tennessee. Okay, that was the first, I thought you'd enjoy that. The second part is that then someone else came up and said, okay, so let me give you some advice. You can never make another short again. And his point was, anything else, like I'd reached the mountaintop, of like playing at Sundance and winning this award. And if I ever made another short, certainly if that was the next thing I made, that it was like going to be a step down because lightning strikes one. Like no matter how great a film I could make, I'm probably not going to win that award again. So I was like, okay, great. So I then spent the next bajillion years trying to get this feature made, and then trying to get another feature made because that feature wasn't taking off. And it was a very frustrating experience. And I did get, finally I decided to try to make another short. I got some money from ITVS. And the story about that is just trying to parlay whatever success you've had, whether it's local or whether it's national or regional or national, trying to figure out how to parlay that into something else, right? And so I was still had a little bit of heat from that award at Sundance, and I was able to parlay that into getting this grant to make this movie called Quick Feet, Soft Hands. And after that, I then tried to make another feature, and again, just kept running into barriers, and decided ultimately to write something really small, that was actually cheaper than the shorts I'd made. And I had $11,000 in the bank, and I thought, I'm going to make a movie for $20,000, and I'll find the other $10,000 after I get the movie going. Mm. And shot and spent probably $8,000 and started going out to some people and being able to show some footage. And my fairy godmother, this investor, sort of came and said, not only do I want to invest in your movie, I wanted to start a production company here in Knoxville, and I want you to run it. So I stepped away from academia for a year and ran that and finished this feature. And that film had some nice success. I mean, it didn't get into Sundance. It got in some other good festivals. It was a New York Times critics pick. It ended up getting picked up by Netflix when they picked up movies by indies. And was able to parlay that into my next film, which was this movie, Light from Light, that came out a few years ago. And that movie, the money for that was found by my producers, who I have known since 2006, back when we were shipping HVX 200s back and forth in the mail to each other. We'd met online. We were friends through blogging about film, and we had a camera in common that we would share. And those guys hit it big. They made a movie with Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara called Ain't Them Bodies Saints that premiered at Sundance, played at Cannes. And they were like, what do you want to make? And so that's how, and they went and found the money for my next film. And it wasn't a lot of money. I still think as a producer when I write and try to make stuff real cheap. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's a long monologue about this stuff. But the fact is, all of this comes back to relationships. And it wasn't the people that I thought were going to get me the money that ultimately brought the money in. And the other part of it is, I think this is real important. I think this is where things like the Elevate Pitch competition come in, is it's about, however small, finding some way to establish legitimacy for your project and for yourself, whether it's a grant, whether it's even beyond the Tennessee Arts Commission. There's the Arts and Culture Alliance of Greater Knoxville that gives grants. Getting someone outside yourself to say this is a worthy project, and things start to snowball. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you take that project that you made and the success you have with that, and then you try to then build off of that. And the one reason it keeps taking longer and longer for me to make features is because each time I just try to make a more ambitious film building off the thing I did before, but that means it's going to take longer. Anyway, that's a long monologue about this. So.
But it's good, and it gets us to the next sort of conversation point, which is how you get that ball rolling. So we've talked about relationships. I could probably throw a beer can and hit someone in this room who's already done me a favor. And I want to know how you guys bring that to life, how you bring together a group of people, what your process is like. Because I think, Siam, you did the 7-day shootout, right? How do you make a film in 7 days, calling in favors, organizing people? Tell us about that.
Well, actually a crazy process because, I mean, first you start by knowing who you, contacting who you know, who you probably work with last, or who you like working with, and they like working with you. And the second part is you got to be honest about it. If you have money, you pay. You know what I'm saying? So you can't be, let's come and work for free. If you have some money, you just have to, put it to the table. This is what I have. If you don't have anything, be real about it. But the thing that's worked for me is it's about the story. So I realized most likely I won't have the money today or tomorrow to produce a short film or even a feature. So I try to have a story that most people are going to relate to, a story that they want to tell, a story that they want to be part of. And so that attracts crew, that attract talent, that attract people because they're, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of that. That's the kind of approach that I go with because I feel like some of the people that have been on my set, like from DP to lighting, some of the people actually are in this room who have helped out. I don't think if I try to pay them like with the money that I have, I'll ever make a movie, right? And so you've got to, try to include them by producing something that they feel like they're proud to be part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Chad, tell me a little bit about your process, because I know you've done some bigger work. You've gone to some festivals and things. Tell us about one of those experiences.
Well, I mean, to his point, I think we play the greatest team sport ever created. We can't do this on our own as much as we're sitting up here. We're maybe a story vision, but it's something that we can't achieve except for maybe Elaine, who does it with her and her husband. But it takes it takes a lot of people, and I think it's all about your collaborators and finding people who are on the same vision as you, who understand the story and believe in it. And sometimes that changes story to story or script to script, but I think that's where it starts. You get people, like he was saying, passionate about the thing you're making, and obviously money is something that we all struggle with. So but we have passionate people who are crazy talented, and me and Kurt talking about this the other day. Our town is very, very dangerous on a very low budget because we're all so good and we're all so used to it, and we make a lot of work here, and our technicians and our crew members are, everything from HMU to G&E and wickedly talented people who can do a lot with a little. And that is such a huge blessing, and why I think we can all sit up here and talk about having an industry here. Now, as for festivals, I think it's just bringing everyone in so they all feel like they're on the team. And it's not just, hey, show up for this day, and then see you later, you'll see the post on Instagram. I try to keep people looped in, texting them, calling them, keep them in an email chain. This is where we're at, this is what we're doing. Share the progress of the project so that they feel like they can cheer it on as it goes as well, or offer help, or however that may be. And then, invite them when it gets into Nashville or gets into Film Quest or whatever, these festivals that I've played, you try to bring them together so that they can feel that and, at least figure out if they want to do it again. So.
Yeah. I mean, what comes next then? So you've made the film, and obviously we've been talking about film festivals, but I'm kind of curious about the actual nuts and bolts of what your strategies are for getting your film seen. So I know documentary will have a bit of a different pathway than short, than the features that you bring in from external places that our crew works on. So can somebody, start us off here? When you're making a film, like, what is the strategy for what you do with it afterwards?
I think it depends on what your goals are.
What are your goals?
I mean, it's just a really, if you're, there's a woman, Amy Dotson, who used to work at IFP, now called the Gotham, who I heard her talk about distribution and basically said, you can make money, you can change the world, or, and I don't even remember what the third one was, have artistic success, I guess, what is your goal, with distributing your film? And if your goal is to have all three of those, then you've got three different tasks. If your goal is to, if it's just if your goal is, I want to make this short film because I've been an actor for a long time and I want to be a director, then, and I want to be seen as a director, then your goals are going to be different than someone who's like, I want to make a lot of money off of this feature, or I want to make a short film so I can get an agent and manager. You got to think about what your goals are with that, and that I think defines your path as whether festivals are the right thing. If you want to make a film and just have a lot of people see it, far more people watch TikTok videos than any film I've ever made, and that's super depressing. But whatever. I mean, but on the other hand, maybe it's not so depressing. But it's you got to think about what the goals are. What are you trying to achieve? And that's what I would say. Anyone who's interested in developing a project of their own is to step back and say what do I want this film to do for me, for my team? We're making and maybe to pivot back to your last question, to also ask your team, what do you want to get out of being? Why are you working on this? What do you want to get out of this experience? Because that can be a really helpful thing to hear and to make sure that they get that experience and that they feel taken care of and feel like that it's not me making the movie, but that it's us making this movie.
Yeah.
Also, to your point about film festivals, I honestly think we're moving into a different era where unless you're getting into Sundance or one of the big Tribeca or something like that, there are so many bullshit film festivals that you're gonna waste money submitting to 100 of these things thinking it's gonna give you a big break. I think what those are great for is you get to see it with the audience and maybe you'll meet somebody that can be a future collaborator. I doubt you'll meet your Hollywood producer in that room. But I think the internet is what it is. Not talking about y'all's festival, of course. That's the different story. I just mean the nature of Film Freeway. You go and you make a festival, or you make a film and you take it out on Film Freeway, and there's 10,000 festivals all asking you to spend $60 a pop to submit it. You get rejected from 95% of them. You just blew a couple grand that you could have spent on your next film when you could have thrown it on YouTube and been engaging with an audience who's watching it. And I think that's really cool.
Found a local partner to do a bunch of screenings that you could reach an audience directly, right?
I can't wait to tell you all this, which is that we don't charge an entry fee for film festivals.
What?
There you go.
For Elevate we do, but that's different. You're getting passes and everything. But along with what Chad said about distribution and finding it in film festivals, one thing that we want to have an edge with in the film festival that we're starting, along with the Oscar nominating run, it's a producer-centric festival. We're going to fly producers in. There'll be people that are looking for a home for the next project, which is why we're bringing them in here to show them what we have and hopefully be able to recruit them for whatever they got next. But it's also great people to rub elbows with and chat with.
Y'all got a party planned?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, big one. Yeah, it's a big one. Anyway, we'll We'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's another thing. You're right. Most festivals, they're not buyers festivals. There's not going to be distributors showing up.
I meant something like the Gatlinburg Creek Universal Film Festival. You know,
I'm not mad.
You know, I will tell an interesting story about this. Do you know the director Craig Brewer? He did Hustle and Flow, and you know the Footloose remake, and he's done some really amazing stuff. Memphis-based. Footloose, Footloose. So I met him at the Nashville Film Festival in 2001. He was there with a feature, his first feature, not Hustle and Flow, a movie that a lot of people don't know that he made as his first feature. It was like an $8,000 feature called The Poor and Hungry. And I encourage you to look up that movie and see if you can find it on the interwebs somewhere. It was made on it wasn't even a digital video camera, it's like a Hi8 video camera. And it's about a guy who works at a chop shop. And, but thinking about strategy, right, and thinking about finding your agents and your managers and things like that, and a lot of these festivals don't have that. He was really strategic about some certain things. I remember him telling me that, so his film, The Poor and Hungry, won an award at a festival in LA. It wasn't like the prestigious at the time, the festival doesn't even exist anymore, called the Los Angeles Independent Film Festival or the LA Film Festival. It was a very small film festival. It was like, I don't even remember what it was called. But he submitted to it because he was like, agents and managers will be at that festival because they're in LA, and some low-level person will have to go and cover that festival. And I'm gonna submit my film to that festival, and he got an agent out of it, and that's what led to him making Hustle and Flow, okay? And so, again, that goes to that sort of idea of like, what do you want to accomplish, and thinking about it very, clinically, like how am I gonna get an agent, and knowing that festivals, aren't, outside of New York and LA probably, or Sundance aren't probably gonna bring in agents and managers, but if that's what your goal is, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome.
Are you repped?
I am. I'm repped by CAA and yeah.
I couldn't help it.
I'm at CAA.
CAA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
Do you have a manager?
No.
CAA.
It's Creative Artists Agency. They're based in LA. They're one of the.
One of the big ones.
Me and Tom Cruise and Elaine.
Yeah.
I do think, though, market research, like doing your homework, making sure your film has not already been made in some way. Like, are you making a film only you can make? Which sounds like a very difficult task, but it is sort of the role, right? Like, if you're going to spend all this time making this film, and then looking at I remember I made this interactive documentary, which people don't make anymore, but it was a fun moment. And I remember looking at previous interactive documentaries from the year before or 2 years before, and just sort of following their trajectory, like what festivals were even taking interactive media, what awards were even being given, who was granting these things. And looking at the National Film Board of Canada, you could see all their interactive documentaries were doing a certain pipeline, right? And there was a pipeline for that type of work. And so I just kind of followed in their footsteps, and I applied for the exact same awards, applied for the exact same festivals, and it's such a small world, and we made such a niche thing that it was able to sort of sneak its way in, even though it was a self-funded interactive doc. So knowing what's already been made and how your film sits in the world of potential that market, and if it feels too similar, like what can you do differently that will set it apart, is important, rather than just making a film blindly and expecting people to want it, right?
Yeah, because that's the business of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And
We did that same thing with both of my features, thinking about which films are playing where, and looking at those festivals, and those are the ones you tailor it to. And comps, you look at your comps.
Your comps, yeah. Wow. So I want to ask the panelists before I ask the audience, was there anything that you didn't get to talk about tonight that you want a teeny tiny soapbox for? Because I'm here to give you that teeny tiny soapbox.
I just think there's so many ways to make this happen. And we've represented many of those, but I definitely am a more Swiss Army knife type of person out of necessity, right? I grew up in a place where there was no production. And I had to learn how to do everything, and did it very poorly for a long time and now I really focus on doing the things I can do, and then hiring the experts to do things I can't do, right? And that really elevates the work in a different way. Like hiring a choreographer for my film totally changed the dance scenes, right? And that's not something I could have done. Or a breath artist. What's a breath artist? I don't do that. So really being specific about my hires, because those people have a specific role and I can pay them for that role, and then they understand that role. It's not one where it's like asking for favors all the time, but doing the things I can do well as I can, and then really trying to bring on people that elevate it in a way that I just can't. Like, I don't have those skills. So I'm an advocate for the Swiss Army knife. I always try to have my students even get out of their comfort zone. It's like, I know you don't like sound, I know you don't like running camera, I know you don't like directing, whichever it is, but at least learn to do it, because when you are directing a crew, if you've been in those shoes, if you've been the gaffer, if you've done these roles, you're gonna be a better director, right? You're gonna be able to treat them with respect and understand their job more clearly. So even if it's not your final step, your final move that you want to move in and be this Swiss Army knife, it's good to at least get experience in those roles. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Soapbox going once? Twice?
Tell personal stories.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, why do it? You know, I mean, I think that you have to make movies that couldn't exist without you.
Yeah. All right. We have someone who is passing around a microphone. We have one hand raised here up in the middle. But if you've got questions, thank you, House Light Wizard. Think about your questions. And we've got some time for it. Go ahead and say your name and your title and ask your question.
I'm Alexandra. I'm primarily a screenwriter, but I'm also a podcaster. My question is more about controversial stuff, because I have a documentary that is literally called The Black Thanksgiving. And then I have a script that, it's a political thriller, but it features a black transgender gay man that's elected for president. So, like, when you're trying to make connections, especially when it comes to getting someone interested in your stuff, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, how do you call in those relationships, especially if they happen to be on the more conservative side?
I think it's a really good time. No, I think it's a really good time to be making stories that are challenging, actually, because there's a lot of new funds that are specifically addressing what you're talking about, whether it's BIPOC producers or trans rights. And I think that it's actually a great time if you're a person from either of those communities to make those connections now and specifically look up those funds. I mean, just a Google search of, BIPOC funding and documentaries. And I mean, there's such incredible funding right now because the field has been so unequitable, and people are trying to rebalance in that way. But I think being really specific about what your story is not is just as important as what it is. So defining, we often write treatments in documentary and pitch and do these things, and so often we're talking about what the film is, but it's funny, people will, if you ask people to echo back to you, so what is my film, after you just heard me talk about it, and then they describe it incorrectly, it's good to know, because then you can find out what your film is not when you hear other people tell you. And so that's good practice, talking about your film, not just holding it to yourself, not being silent about it, but talking about it to people and then asking them, what did I say, So those are my suggestions.
Anybody else want to chime in there?
I think it's just about, finding people who want to passionately tell your stories with you, rather than convince them to be a part of a thing. I mean, that's the wrestling match that we all have. It's building a team. But I will say, as soon as this writer strike's over, I also think there's a lot of fellowships out there that studios put together that would be right down the pipe for those.
Again, I'll just say that, I think that if you're speaking to you, but also speaking to anybody else, if you're someone who feels like you don't have any network, it's probably not going to come fast, and you got to find some way. I would just say, this idea of legitimacy, and I know that's a really problematic word for in a lot of different ways, and especially for people who are coming from underrepresented communities, in this business, but finding some way to say like, somebody else thinks something about this work. So there's screenwriting competitions. There are fellowships. There are labs for emerging writers and directors, and that stuff is really easily findable on the internet. If you look for emerging filmmaker labs, emerging filmmaker grants, all these different things, and it may be a while before that feature gets made. You got to have that short film that shows like I can direct. And it may be a couple of short films before you have a short film that actually shows you can direct. I know I made a bunch of really bad movies. Yeah. So then that means finding someone who wants to, if you don't want to direct your work, finding someone who wants to produce, or finding a manager or agent who wants to sell it. There's a lot of different things, and there are lots of there's a lot of information. We live in a time again that's like where there's more information out there than ever before about how to build these networks. But if it's a screenplay, I would say start submitting to screenplay competitions and submitting it to labs. But the first thing is, I think it helps. It's like Elaine was talking about these grants. It's like that grant is the first. Grants beget other grants. It's a pipeline. People start realizing, oh, you got that grant? Oh, well, that means you must be good in their eyes, so we'll take a look at your work. That's the way this stuff happens. So finding your first way in, someone saying, this is really interesting, this is good. And until you do that, keep making the work and keep trying to, and make more of it. Don't get attached to one project. I made that mistake for a long time.
So if I've learned anything from everything that y'all have shared tonight, it's definitely that it takes time. Those of you who are there with completed features and things like that, it took a lot of time and it was quite a windy road. Those of us who are not yet there, who are still on the path, work begets more work. The more work you make, the more work you have to talk about. I would say that that's the only way that I personally have ever maintained a network, is always having some new shit to tell somebody about. Have you heard about my new project? Actually, you owe me an email.
Yeah, like 10 or 12 times already. It's great. I'm going to read it again.
But just always having something to share and also being part of community. If you got to call in a favor, doing favors for other people. If you have money, share it. Being honest and being open and bringing people with you. And I'll be honest, I kind of threw you guys a little bit of a bone there when I said that Knoxville wasn't always thought about as a place to live and produce. I mean, come on, I just wanted to piss you off. Because truly, look at the community that's here. Look how many people came out here tonight after 12-hour days on set to come and hear y'all speak. How many of the people in this room have come out to work on your sets, or you have worked on their sets, or read their script and given them notes? So just staying in community and continuing to do the work, even if it's inexpensive, even if it's small, even if it's short, and maybe it'll get into Sundance.
Well, I think it's also about not seeing that as the mountain, the only mountain. There's a lot of different things out there.
And sometimes when you get that success moment and the things you thought would happen after that success moment don't happen, it's actually really humbling and great. I got nominated for an Oscar. That sounds like the craziest thing ever. I will have all my films easily funded at this point, right? Of people that know that's not the case. What happens is you're then seen as someone who can make something that is awards worthy, so they want you to make their crap, right? Nobody wants to make your stuff. And so when I had that success point, I felt very lucky that I knew my values and what I wanted to actually spend my life doing. And I wasn't just taking this work that was thrown at me, that was high profile celebrities or whatever, because it paid and those are hard choices to make, but I think knowing your values is something we haven't mentioned that's really important, right? And that changes your audience. Who is your audience based on that question is a completely different thing. And so Sundance may not align with your values. That is awesome. You can have an incredible career without that. So there is no moment you reach Like, yeah, we're like, I feel very lucky, and I've been working my butt off to be here, but I also have had a lot of breaks, right? I've met a lot of people that have helped me along the way, but I'm still hustling to get money to fund my films. Nobody's made this easy necessarily, and even with the incredible things that I have at my disposal. So it doesn't end, right? You don't reach this moment where it ends.
When Kurt was saying the thing about wanting to be an actor, and suffering with the idea of I want to try to do this, and can I do this? And I was just this thought occurred in my head, which is oh, you're gonna trade one kind of suffering, which is I'm not doing the thing, for this other suffering, which is now I'm doing the thing or trying to. Because that's what we're sitting up here as success stories, but it's God, it's really hard, and there's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot. This is not if you don't like disappointment, it's I tell my students, if you like disappointment, this is the career for you, because you are gonna get knocked down all the time, and
There's no golden ticket.
there's no golden ticket. But and that's why I was saying make personal work, because at the end of the day, you've at least done that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's always a mountain beyond the mountain. So you really need to learn to enjoy the journey, love what you do, love what you make, love the people you make it with, because it's really hard. I can't sit at a desk all day. I can't do that. So I love being on set. I love my crew. I love making things and passionately telling stories. If I knew I was going to be where I am, thinking back to who I was 5 years ago, I'd probably be amped. But now I still feel like I haven't made it. And I think in 10 years, I still won't feel like I've made it. And even if I make a movie that is lucky to go to Sundance or be Oscar nominated, I probably still won't feel like I made it. And that's just the nature of the game. So I think it's just fixing your mind to be I'm so lucky to be doing anything in this industry and to work as a creative and to just love the people that I'm with.
Totally.
So.
Well said.
On that inspiring note, I do want to take one more question from the back.
Hey, this it's really fascinating to hear everybody's stories and how each of you took a different path to get to different places and the obstacles and overcoming the obstacles. I came here tonight because I make music videos, and I thought, well, maybe I'll meet some camera people. I'm always looking for camera people. Heads up, by the way, camera people. But I have a question for you concerning distribution and marketing of music videos, and I was wondering if you had any special insights or personal experiences with doing that beyond just direct distribution, which we're all very familiar with.
I've made a music video, but it was directly for the record label, and they distributed it, so on YouTube. So I didn't have control over the distribution and marketing, so I don't know that I could be that helpful. But my husband is a cinematographer. If you're looking for cinematographers, we can exchange contact. Do you guys have?
I've done a couple music videos. One I was hired by the marketing agency, and then one it was directly through the label like yours. Both went to YouTube. I think they did their own press release. I think one of them went on CMT, and then but it's not really where I operate too much. That was years ago. I mean, it's a hard side of the industry, honestly. Not a lot of money in it. So you have to really be passionate about it. So, but no, I wish I could help you more about.
Yeah, likewise, I've done one, and it was a great experience making it because I got to go to France, but to do it. But beyond that, it was again YouTube, and it was it was a label thing, and that was it.
I've done one. I almost got shot at it. I've done a rap music video, but I feel like that was a different time because that was before TikTok. So, but I feel now there's a lot of social media influencers and stuff like that that people can benefit from, especially music video.
Interesting. Thank you guys for weighing in on that. I appreciate it. So I thank you guys for coming to this panel, for coming to the event. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you guys. And I do want to thank our sponsors one more time. I want to thank Jonathan Halley back there. Thank you for starting Knox Media. Thank you to the Knox Media board. Thank you to Wavelength Lighting for sponsoring beers for us tonight. You can meet them. They have a table in the back near the concession stand. Thank you to Honeybee Styling. Thank you to Sono Locus and to Horizon Grip. Did I miss anybody? And I'm Amelia Bartlett. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Please socialize.